In the chaotic, beer-soaked streets of post-World War I Munich, a strange and potent new symbol began to appear. It was a sunwheel swastika laid over a long, gleaming dagger. This was the emblem of the Thule Society, a secret order of German aristocrats, wealthy industrialists, academics, and occultists who gathered in the lavish back rooms of the Four Seasons Hotel. They were obsessed with Germanic paganism, astrology, and a mythical lost Aryan homeland called Thule. To an outsider, they might have looked like a harmless, eccentric club for the rich and disillusioned. But this was no mere social gathering. This was the mystical cradle of the Nazi Party, a place where the men who would one day attempt to conquer the world first came together to sell their souls for power. The society's founder and spiritual master was a man named Rudolf von Sebottendorf. He was a shadowy figure, a German adventurer and spy who had spent years in the Ottoman Empire, where he had been initiated into the esoteric secrets of Sufi mysticism and Freemasonry. He returned to Germany with a twisted fusion of these ideas, which he blended with the racist, pseudo-historical theories of Ariosophy. The result was the Thule Society, named after Ultima Thule, the mythical, icy northern homeland that Greek legends described as the birthplace of the ancient, godlike Aryan race. The society's core belief was a paranoid and intoxicating conspiracy theory. They taught that the pure-blooded Aryan race, the descendants of the supermen from Thule, had been weakened and corrupted over the centuries by interbreeding with inferior races, most notably the Jewish people. Their forbidden rituals were designed to awaken their dormant Aryan blood and channel psychic energies. They held seances, practiced astral projection, and attempted to contact ancient hidden masters, or secret chiefs, who they believed secretly guided the destiny of the world. But their mysticism was a thin veneer for a very real and very violent political agenda. The Thule Society was not just a talking shop, it was an active counter-revolutionary force in the chaos of post-war Germany. When communists seized control of Bavaria in 1919 and created the short-lived Bavarian Soviet Republic, the Thule Society became the nerve center of the right-wing resistance. They engaged in espionage, stockpiled weapons, and used their vast funds to print anti-Semitic propaganda. Most significantly, they helped to create and finance the Freikorps Oberland, a brutal, heavily armed paramilitary group of demobilized soldiers who would later play a key role in violently crushing the communist government. This was their great secret. While they spoke of ancient myths and spiritual energies in their hotel meeting rooms, they were actively pouring money and support into the street-level violence that was tearing their city apart. And it was from this toxic brew of high society occultism and lowbrow street thuggery that their most monstrous creation would emerge. A Thule Society member, a railway locksmith named Anton Drexler, had founded a small political discussion group for workers called the German Workers' Party, or DAP. It was just one of dozens of such tiny nationalist groups in Munich at the time. But the Thule Society saw its potential. They sent one of their own, a journalist named Karl Harrer, to help shape its ideology. And in 1919, Harrer sent a young army intelligence agent to infiltrate the DAP and report on its activities. That young agent's name was Adolf Hitler. Hitler arrived at the meeting and quickly became its star. His electrifying, hypnotic speaking ability captivated the small crowds. He quickly took over the party, and with the ideological framework, financial backing, and crucial early support of the influential men of the Thule Society, he transformed it into something new and far more powerful. The National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party. The list of Thule Society members and associates who became the architects of the Third Reich is chilling. There was Rudolf Hess, who would become Hitler's devoted deputy. There was Alfred Rosenberg, the fanatical philosopher who became the Nazi Party's chief racial theorist. There was Hans Frank, the lawyer who would go on to be the Governor-General of occupied Poland, a man known as the Butcher of Poland. And there was Dietrich Eckart, a wealthy publisher and Thule Society member who became Hitler's early mentor, introducing him to the rich and powerful of Munich and grooming him for leadership. The Thule Society had found what it was looking for. Their forbidden rituals and seances had been a search for a German messiah, a chosen one to lead the Aryan race. In the angry, charismatic, and deeply insecure Adolf Hitler, they believed they had found him. They gave his fledgling movement its core symbols, including the swastika, and its core, poisonous ideas of Aryan supremacy. They had sold their souls for the power to shape a nation's destiny. The irony is that once Hitler had consolidated his power, he turned on the very secret societies that had nurtured him. As a paranoid tyrant, he could not tolerate any source of power or secret loyalty that did not belong to him. In 1937, he officially suppressed the Thule Society, along with the Freemasons and other esoteric orders. Its founder, Sabbatendorf, was briefly imprisoned and later fled into exile, dying in obscurity. The society that had dreamed of a mystical German Reich was consumed by the far more practical and brutal political machine it had helped to create. The Thule Society is one of history's most terrifying examples of how fringe, occult ideas can infect the political mainstream with catastrophic results. Their forbidden rituals in the back rooms of a luxury hotel brewed a mystical poison of racial hatred that they then injected directly into the heart of German politics, helping to create the monster that would devour them and then the world. The year is 1092. The Grand Vizier of the mighty Seljuk Empire, Nizam al-Mulk, one of the most powerful men in the world, is being carried in his litter from the Sultan's court. A man, dressed as a Sufi mystic, approaches the procession, seemingly begging for a blessing. As he draws near, he suddenly pulls a long, sharp dagger from beneath his robes and plunges it deep into the vizier's heart. The vizier is dead before his guards can even react. The killer makes no attempt to escape. He stands his ground, a serene, almost blissful smile on his face, as the guards cut him down. This was not a common murderer driven by greed or personal revenge. This was a fedayeen, a self-sacrificing devotee. He was a living weapon, dispatched by the most feared secret society in the medieval world, the Order of Assassins. The Grand Master of this shadowy order was a man named Hassan-i-Sabah. He was not a great warrior or a king. He was a brilliant and fanatically devout Nizari Ismaili missionary. The Ismailis were a minority branch of Shia Islam, and they were brutally persecuted by the ruling Sunni Seljuk Empire. Outnumbered and outgunned, Hassan realized he could not win a conventional war. So he chose a different path. He chose the path of terror. His base of operations, his unthinkable creation, was a network of impregnable mountain fortresses, the most famous of which was Alamut, the Eagle's Nest, a castle perched on a razor-sharp ridge in the mountains of northern Iran. From this fortress, he established a decentralized Ismaili state and waged a new kind of asymmetrical warfare against his enemies. He did not need a vast army. He needed only a handful of utterly loyal, completely fearless agents. And the method he used to create them is the source of the assassin's terrifying legend. This legend, spread by horrified crusaders and travelers like Marco Polo, was the secret to the assassin's power. It was how Hassan-i-Sabah convinced his followers to sell their souls for his cause. The story goes that Hassan would select young, strong men from the surrounding villages for his order. He would then have them drugged with a powerful potion made from hashish, from which the derogatory name hashashin, or hashish user, is thought to derive. While the recruits were in a deep, unconscious sleep, they would be carried into a secret valley within the fortress grounds. Hassan had transformed this valley into a literal paradise on earth. It was a magnificent garden, filled with fountains flowing with wine, milk, and honey, orchards of exotic fruits, and pavilions draped in silk and gold. And most importantly, it was filled with the most beautiful women, the houris, who would sing, play music, and cater to the young man's every desire. After a few days of living in what he believed was heaven, the recruit would be drugged again and return to the cold, Spartan reality of the main fortress. He would awaken at the feet of Hassan-i-Sabah. The Grand Master would then explain to him that he, and he alone, held the keys to paradise, and that the young man had just been given a special glimpse. He was told that if he served with absolute, unquestioning loyalty and died while carrying out a mission, he would immediately and permanently return to that garden of earthly delights. This forbidden ritual, whether it was real or a brilliant piece of enemy propaganda, was the engine of Hassan's power. He created agents who had no fear of death. To them, death was not an end, it was a promotion. These were his fedayeen, the ones who sacrificed themselves. Their method of killing was a form of psychological warfare. They did not use poison or arrows from a distance. Their weapon was always the dagger, a tool that required them to get intimately close to their powerful, heavily guarded targets, and they never killed in secret. They struck in public places, in crowded mosques on a Friday, in the middle of a sultan's court, or in a crusader's camp. The goal was not just to eliminate the target, but to make a bloody public statement. They were proving to the world that no wall was high enough and no army of guards was large enough to protect you from their reach. After completing their mission, the assassins were trained to make no attempt to escape. They would often stand calmly over the body of their victim and wait to be killed, their minds fixed on the paradise that awaited them. This fanatical self-sacrifice terrified their enemies even more than the assassinations themselves. For over a century and a half, the assassins held the great powers of the Middle East in a state of fear. They murdered caliphs, viziers, and dukes. They even took on the great Saladin, the conqueror who had retaken Jerusalem from the Crusaders. After Saladin threatened them, he awoke one night in his heavily guarded command tent to find a familiar poisoned dagger stuck in the ground next to his pillow. Pinned to it was a note warning him that he had been spared this time. A terrified Saladin quickly negotiated a truce with the order. They had proven their point. The reign of the Old Man of the Mountain and his assassins was finally brought to an end, not by the Seljuks or the Crusaders, but by an unstoppable force of nature, the Mongol Empire. In 1256, the hordes of Hulagu Khan besieged and after a long and difficult struggle, finally captured the fortress of Alamut, wiping the Ismaili state from the map. But the legend of the assassins would live on. They had perfected the art of terror as a political weapon. Their forbidden ritual of the secret paradise, whether real or imagined, was a tool of psychological control so powerful that it created the most effective and feared killers of the medieval age. Their legacy is so potent that their very name, assassin, has been absorbed into languages across the world as the universal word for a dedicated, politically motivated killer, a testament to the terrifying power of a secret society that promised its followers heaven in exchange for sending their enemies to hell. For centuries, a terrifying mystery haunted the sprawling road networks of India. Travelers would simply vanish. A wealthy merchant on his way to market, a group of pilgrims on their way to a holy site, a British soldier returning to his post. They would leave one town and never arrive at the next, disappearing without a single trace. This was not the work of common bandits who attacked with force. This was the work of the Thuggee, the most prolific, successful, and feared secret society of murderers in human history. They were men who would become your friend, your traveling companion, and your sworn brother for days on end, all before strangling you in the dead of night as a sacred offering to their dark goddess. The Thuggee, or Thags as they were known in Hindi, meaning deceivers, were a hereditary secret society of ritual assassins. Membership was a sacred duty, often passed down from father to son for generations. For more than 600 years, they hid in plain sight, operating as a secret subculture that permeated the entire subcontinent. By day, they were unassuming villagers, farmers, or merchants. But when the time for a journey came, they became the deadliest predators on the road. Their method, their unthinkable creation, was a masterpiece of social engineering and psychological deception. They did not attack their victims with brute force. They would infiltrate them. A small group of thugs, posing as travelers themselves, would join a caravan or a group of pilgrims. They were masters of social camouflage, able to adopt any role. They were charming, friendly, and helpful. For days, sometimes even weeks, they would journey with their intended victims. They would share their food, sing their songs, help tend to their animals, and listen to their stories. They would lull their targets into a state of complete and total trust, becoming their fast friends and protectors on the dangerous roads. All the while, they were gathering intelligence, learning who had the most valuable goods, who was armed, and planning the perfect isolated spot for the attack, a place they called a bell. Then, at a prearranged moment, usually as the travelers were resting for the night, the leader of the Thuggee gang would give the signal. It was often a simple coded phrase like, "Bring the tobacco." At that signal, the deception would end, and the ritual would begin. Each thug had a designated role. The strangler, the bertot, would position himself behind the chosen victim. In his hands, he would have their primary weapon and sacred tool, the rumal, a length of yellow silk cloth, weighted at one end, that was both a garrote and a holy symbol of their goddess. At the signal, in a single, coordinated, and silent movement, the rumals would be whipped around the necks of the victims. A second thug, the holder of hands, or shumseya, would grab the victim to prevent them from struggling. The strangulation was brutally quick and efficient. It was a sacred rule of the thuggy to shed no blood, making this silent method the perfect form of murder. The ritual did not end with death. The bodies were quickly stripped of every valuable. Then, another designated thug would use a consecrated pickaxe, the kusi, to dig a mass grave. The corpses were mutilated, their joints broken, to hasten decomposition and prevent the bodies from swelling and revealing the location of the grave. They were then buried, and the thugs would perform a ritual meal over the site. After, they would vanish back into the fabric of Indian society, the wealth they had plundered seen as a divine gift from their goddess. This goddess was Kali, the Hindu deity of time, creation, and destruction. The thuggy were her devout and fanatical worshippers. They believed they were the inheritors of a sacred duty, outlined in their own dark mythology. The myth told of a time when the goddess Kali was locked in a great battle with a demon who spawned a new demon from every drop of its blood that touched the earth. To help her, Kali created two men from the sweat of her brow and gave them a sash made from the hem of her own garment, instructing them to kill the demons without shedding blood. The thuggy believed they were the descendants of these first two men, and that every traveler they strangled was not a murder, but a holy sacrifice to their goddess, a continuation of that primordial battle against evil. The scale of their operations is almost impossible to comprehend. The Guinness Book of World Records once credited the thuggy with being responsible for as many as 2 million deaths over their long history. While that number is debated, even the more conservative estimates from the British officials who eventually destroyed the cult place the number in the tens or even hundreds of thousands. This makes them, by far, the deadliest criminal fraternity in human history. Their reign of terror was finally brought to an end in the 1830s by an obsessed British East India Company official named Sir William Henry Sleeman. Sleeman realized that the thuggy could not be defeated with conventional police work. They were too secretive, too widespread. So he created a dedicated police force, the Thuggy and Dacoity Department, and employed a new tactic. He began capturing thugs and offering them a deal: become an approver, an informant, in exchange for your life. The code of silence that had protected the cult for centuries began to crack. Hundreds of thugs, faced with the gallows, chose to betray their brothers. They revealed the cult's secret language, their hand signs, their sacred rituals, their favored killing grounds, and, most importantly, the names of thousands of their fellow members. It was a cascade of betrayal that brought the entire secret society crashing down. Over 1,000 thugs were hanged or transported for life, and the cult was effectively wiped out. The thuggy were a secret society of almost unparalleled success and lethality. Their forbidden ritual of befriending and then strangling their victims was both a brutally effective method of robbery and a sacred act of worship. They sold their souls, as they saw it, not for earthly power, but for the divine favor of their goddess, who they believed rewarded them with the riches of their victims. Their story is a chilling look at a world where friendship was a weapon, travel was a potential death sentence, and a secret religion of mass murder could hide in plain sight for over 600 years. On the banks of the River Thames, not far from London, stands the ruin of a Cistercian monastery called Medmenham Abbey. But in the mid-18th century, this was no house of God. Carved in stained glass above the main doorway was a new, defiant motto, taken from the French writer Rabelais: Fais ce que voudras, do what thou wilt. This was the headquarters of the most infamous and exclusive secret society in Georgian England, a group of powerful politicians and decadent aristocrats who playfully called themselves the Monks of Medmenham, but who would become known to history by a far more sinister name: the Hellfire Club. The founder and abbot of this unholy order was Sir Francis Dashwood. He was the quintessential 18th century rake, fabulously wealthy, a well-traveled connoisseur of classical art, a member of parliament who would eventually become the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and a man with a deep and passionate taste for shocking the establishment. He was bored by the stuffy morality of his age. He decided to create a secret playground for his fellow elites, a place where they could escape the prying eyes of society and indulge their most profound appetites for wine, women, and witty blasphemy. The members of his order were a who's who of the British ruling class. They included powerful figures like the Earl of Sandwich, a First Lord of the Admiralty who supposedly invented the sandwich so he wouldn't have to leave the gambling table to eat. Membership was exclusive, and their secrecy was absolute. This secrecy is what fueled the public's fear. What were the most powerful men in the British Empire? The men running the government, the navy, and the economy doing in their secret abbey? The answer, according to the lurid rumors that spread like wildfire, was that they were consorting with the devil himself. The forbidden rituals of the Hellfire Club were a masterclass in theatrical blasphemy. The members, who called each other brother, would dress in the white robes of Franciscan monks. They would gather in the restored abbey, which Dashwood had lavishly decorated with pornographic art and statues of the pagan gods of pleasure, Bacchus and Venus. Their nuns were high-class prostitutes who were ferried to the abbey dressed as nuns and referred to as the Sisters of St. Francis. Their ceremonies were direct and deliberate parodies of Catholic rites. They drank fine wines from communion cups and skull-shaped goblets. They reportedly ate meals like Holy Ghost pie and devil's loins. The main event of their meetings was often a mock black mass, a satirical inversion of the most sacred Christian ritual, performed in the main chapel. But instead of worshiping Christ, they were said to pay homage to pagan gods and even, it was whispered, to Satan himself. Was it genuine Satanism? Almost certainly not. For Dashwood and his intellectual friends, it was likely a form of libertine, anti-religious theater. It was a way for them to prove that they, the enlightened elite, were above the petty morality that governed the common man. But in a deeply religious society, the line between mocking the devil and worshiping him was a thin one. The public was terrified by the idea that the men running their country were, in secret, selling their souls for power and pleasure. The club's activities were not confined to the abbey. On his own estate at West Wycombe, Dashwood had an elaborate network of man-made caves excavated from the chalk hills. The entrance was designed to look like a Gothic church facade. Inside, a series of chambers and passageways were named after body parts, leading to a great central hall, and finally, across a subterranean river the members called the Styx, to the inner temple. It was here, deep underground, that the most secret and debauched of their rituals were rumored to take place. The club's downfall came not from a police raid, but from a prank that went horribly wrong, a moment when their theatrical blasphemy collided with genuine terror. The story goes that one member, who was a political rival of the Earl of Sandwich, decided to play a trick. During one of the club's mock summoning rituals, he secretly released a baboon, which he had dressed in a cloak and horns to resemble a demon, into the chamber. The members, who were deep in their cups and in the middle of their profane ceremony, saw this creature suddenly appear amidst the candlelight and incense. They panicked. In their drunken terror, they genuinely believed they had summoned the devil. Chaos erupted, with the terrified aristocrats stampeding to escape the demon, their secret games shattered by a dose of what they thought was supernatural reality. The club never recovered from the incident and soon disbanded. The Hellfire Club was likely more about aristocratic excess than genuine occultism. Their forbidden ritual was the act of mocking everything that 18th century society held sacred. They were a secret society feared not because they were assassins or political revolutionaries, but because they represented the moral rot at the very top of the social ladder. They sold their souls, not for worldly power which they already had, but for the ultimate aristocratic pleasure of being above all rules, both mortal and divine. Their story, a lurid blend of fact and sensational legend, remains a fascinating glimpse into the hypocrisy and secret debauchery of the ruling class, and a perfect example of how a secret society can become feared not for what it actually does, but for what the public imagines it does in the dark. You have heard their name. It is whispered in the darkest corners of the internet and shouted in the headlines of tabloids. They are the secret masters of the world. a shadowy cabal of elites who control everything from the banks to the media to the governments of nations. Their symbol, the all-seeing eye on the back of the American $1 bill, is seen as proof of their hidden, global influence. They are the Illuminati. They are the ultimate secret society, the puppet masters pulling the strings of history. That is the legend. But the reality of the historical Illuminati, the real men who met in secret in the heart of Bavaria, is a far more fascinating story. The order was born from the mind of one man, Adam Weishaupt. He was a brilliant but deeply frustrated professor of canon law at the University of Ingolstadt in the 1770s. Weishaupt was a radical product of the Enlightenment, a man who believed in reason, liberty, and the perfectibility of the human race. And he was surrounded by everything he hated: the oppressive, absolute power of the Bavarian monarchy and the suffocating intellectual control of the Catholic Church, particularly the Jesuit order. He dreamed of a world free from superstition and tyranny, and he decided the only way to achieve it was to fight fire with fire. He would create his own secret society, an anti-Jesuit order that would use the Jesuits' own methods of secrecy and infiltration against them. On May 1st, 1776, the Bavarian Order of the Illuminati was born. Their goal was audacious and deeply subversive. Weishaupt planned to secretly recruit the best and brightest minds of Germany: professors, doctors, lawyers, writers, and even princes and government ministers. He would then guide these influential men through a series of esoteric grades, slowly revealing the order's true radical purpose: to subtly and patiently achieve positions of power within the state, the church, and other institutions. From within, they would work to dismantle the monarchy and the church and guide humanity toward a new age of reason, a stateless, classless, and religion-free utopia. Their forbidden rituals were a masterpiece of secretive, cellular organization. To protect their identities, all members took on classical code names. Weishaupt himself was Spartacus. His most influential recruiter, the charismatic Baron von Knigge, was Philo. Munich was Athens. It was a world of ciphers, secret handshakes, and layered deception. A new recruit, a novice, would know almost nothing of the order's true aims. They were taught only vague principles of virtue and self-improvement. Only as they were initiated into the higher ranks of Minerval and Illuminated Minerval would the true, radical, and anti-monarchist goals of the order be revealed to them. Their entire structure was a lie, a respectable shell hiding a revolutionary core. For a time, the plan worked. The Illuminati grew to include a few thousand members across the German states, including influential men like the writer Johann von Goethe. But the society was doomed by its own internal paranoia and the very forces it sought to destroy. Weishaupt was a brilliant theorist but a poor manager, and he entered into a bitter power struggle with his top deputy, Baron von Knigge. At the same time, the conservative government of Bavaria, with the full support of the Catholic Church, began to see the Illuminati as a genuine and dangerous threat. In 1785, the Duke of Bavaria, Karl Theodor, banned all secret societies. The government raided the homes of high-ranking members, seized their internal documents, their membership lists, and their secret correspondence. These documents were then published and distributed across Europe as a warning. Adam Weishaupt was forced to flee, and the historical Bavarian Illuminati, after less than a decade of existence, was effectively crushed. This should have been the end of the story: a small, failed society of radicals, exposed and disbanded. But this is where the story truly begins. The publication of their secret documents had the opposite of its intended effect. Instead of just proving they had been destroyed, it created the blueprint for the greatest conspiracy theory of all time. The myth of the all-powerful Illuminati was created by two men working independently who were fleeing the chaos and terror of the French Revolution. A Scottish academic named John Robison and a French Jesuit priest named Augustin Baruel both published sensational books arguing that the Illuminati had not been destroyed in Bavaria. They claimed the order had simply gone deeper underground, and that it was they who had secretly orchestrated the entire French Revolution. They claimed the Illuminati were now a vast international conspiracy, working to destroy all monarchies, abolish all private property, and eliminate all religion in their quest to establish a tyrannical, one-world government. Suddenly, every revolutionary idea, Every political upheaval could be blamed on this single, shadowy organization. They were the perfect enemy, invisible, all-powerful, and utterly evil. The Bavarian Illuminati is one of history's greatest paradoxes. The real historical organization was a footnote, a small group of idealistic but ultimately naive intellectuals who failed completely in their goals. But the idea of the Illuminati, the myth born from the paranoia of the French Revolution, became one of the most powerful and feared secret societies of all time. They sold their souls for power in a way their founder never could have imagined. Their true, unthinkable creation was not a new world order, but a self-perpetuating conspiracy theory, a modern myth so potent that it continues to fuel fear and suspicion to this very day. The Illuminati are a chilling testament to the fact that sometimes the most feared secret society is not a real organization at all, but a ghost that lives only in the minds of those who believe in it. Imagine you are a nobleman living in medieval Westphalia, a land of dark forests and simmering feuds. One morning you awaken to a chilling discovery. Pinned to the heavy oak door of your castle is a dagger. Attached to it is a small piece of parchment, marked with a cryptic seal and 4 letters, SSGG, standing for Stick, Stone, Grass, Greet. You have just received a summons from the Holy Vame. You have been accused of a crime, you do not know what. Your accusers are anonymous, and you are now commanded to appear at a secret time and place to be judged by a court of hooded men. To ignore the summons is to confess your guilt and be declared an outlaw, a man whose life is now forfeit, to be hunted down and hanged on the nearest tree by any member of the order. This was the terrifying power of the Vamic courts, a secret society that acted as judge, jury, and executioner in the lawless heart of the Holy Roman Empire. The Vame emerged from the chaos of the late Middle Ages. The authority of the Holy Roman Emperor was often weak and distant, and the local feudal lords were either too corrupt or too powerless to enforce justice. Highway robbery was rampant. Feuds between noble families would turn into small-scale wars, and murder often went unpunished. In this vacuum of power, the Vamic courts arose as a dark and necessary evil. They were a parallel legal system, a secret fraternity that promised to deliver the swift, iron-fisted justice that the official courts could not. Their origins were shrouded in myth. They claimed to have been founded by the great Emperor Charlemagne himself, a lie that gave them a powerful aura of ancient legitimacy. At its head was the theoretical leader of the order, the Holy Roman Emperor himself, who was considered the supreme judge. The members, who were known as the Freischufen or free judges, were all free men of good character who had been initiated into the society's secrets. Membership was not limited to a small cabal. At its height in the 15th century, the order had thousands of initiated members all across Germany, from common artisans and farmers to powerful knights, barons, and dukes. This was the source of their terrifying power. They were everywhere, and they were nowhere. Their forbidden ritual was the secret court itself, the Heimliches Act, or secret tribunal. When a man was accused of a serious crime, the process began. A summons was issued. If the accused was brave enough to appear, he would be taken to a secret location, often at night, in a remote forest clearing, in the ruins of a castle, or under an ancient oak tree. There, he would face the assembled free judges, who were often hooded or masked to conceal their identities. The man judging you could be your baker, your neighbor, or your own feudal lord. The trial was swift. Evidence was presented, but the verdict often rested on a system of oaths. An accused man could attempt to prove his innocence by bringing a certain number of other initiated members to act as oath helpers, who would swear on their lives to his good character. If he could not find enough oath helpers, or if the evidence against him was overwhelming, the presiding judge would declare him guilty. The sentence was almost always death. The head of the court would pronounce the verdict, and the condemned was now declared verfammt, an outlaw, forfeited to the Vame. Their life no longer belonged to them. Every initiated member of the Holy Vame, wherever they might be, now had a sacred and legal duty to kill this person on sight. There was no appeal, and there was nowhere to hide. The executions were symbolic and designed to send a clear message. The condemned was not to be killed in a private duel or a quiet alley. They were to be hanged from the nearest tree. After the sentence was carried out, the executioners would leave their calling card. They would take a dagger and drive it into the trunk of the tree above the corpse. This was not a common murder. This was a formal execution of the Holy Vihem. It was a warning to all who saw it. Justice, in its own brutal way, had been served. For a time, the Vamic courts were a powerful and perhaps even stabilizing force in a violent age. But absolute anonymous power inevitably corrupts. As the society's influence grew, it became a tool for settling personal vendettas, for assassinating political rivals, and for simple extortion. The secrecy that was once its greatest strength became a shield for its own brand of injustice. A man could be accused, judged, and condemned without ever knowing who his enemies were. The power of the Vamic courts eventually faded as the German states began to centralize and create their own, more effective and transparent legal systems in the 16th and 17th centuries. The need for a secret, parallel judiciary vanished. But the legend of the Holy Vame endured, a dark folk memory of a time when justice was carried out by hooded men in secret. They sold their souls for power by taking the law into their own hands, becoming a feared shadow government that operated beyond appeal. Their story is a chilling reminder of what happens when the official systems of justice collapse and when secret, anonymous men are given the sacred right to decide who lives and who dies. In the boardrooms and back alleys of Tokyo, they are an undeniable, if often unspoken, presence. By day, they are businessmen in sharp, conservative suits, the heads of construction companies, talent agencies, and financial firms. They are powerful figures, deeply embedded in the fabric of Japanese society. But in the private confines of a bathhouse or a secret meeting room, they reveal their true allegiance. Their bodies are covered, from the neck to the wrists and ankles, in a vibrant, magnificent tapestry of mythological beasts, ancient heroes, and sacred symbols. This is the Irazumi, the full-body tattoo. It is the sacred secret skin of the Yakuza, Japan's infamous organized crime syndicates, a secret society bound by rituals of blood, ink, and steel. The Yakuza trace their origins back centuries, to the outcasts of Japan's rigid feudal society. They see themselves as the spiritual descendants of the Bakuto, or itinerant gamblers, and the Takiya, or peddlers. But their most powerful myth is their connection to the Ronin, the masterless samurai. They have cultivated a complex code of conduct and a rigid pseudo-family hierarchy that mimics the old feudal clans. At the top is the Oyabun, the father figure, who holds absolute authority. Below him are his loyal soldiers, the Kobun, his children, who swear an oath of undying fealty to him. This is not just a business relationship, it is a sacred spiritual bond, and it is sealed by one of their most important forbidden rituals, the Sakazuki ceremony. During this formal initiation, the new recruit and the Oyabun sit before each other. A special ceremonial cup is filled with sake, which is sometimes mixed with a drop of blood from both men. The Oyabun drinks from the cup, then passes it to the recruit. By sharing sake from this single cup, they are symbolically creating a new family, a bond of loyalty that is meant to be more powerful than the ties to one's own blood relatives. The new member has just sold his soul to his new father. But the most famous mark of this commitment is the Irazumi. For the Yakuza, the tattoo is not a fashion statement. It is a rite of passage, a testament to one's courage, and a lifelong billboard of one's allegiance. The process is a grueling ordeal. It is traditionally done using the tebari method, where the ink is poked into the skin by hand, using a bundle of sharpened needles on a bamboo handle. It is an excruciatingly painful and incredibly slow process that can take years and hundreds of hours to complete. The pain is part of the ritual, a trial by fire that proves one's worthiness. The tattoos themselves are a secret language. A dragon represents power and strength. A koi fish swimming upstream symbolizes luck and perseverance. A tiger shows courage. The artwork tells the story of the man wearing it, but it is a story hidden from the katagi, or ordinary citizens. A space is often left bare down the center of the chest and stomach, so that a buttoned-up shirt will completely conceal the secret world that lies beneath. But the Yakuza have another far more gruesome ritual, one reserved not for commitment, but for atonement. It is called yubitsume. When a Yakuza member makes a serious mistake, disobeys an order, fails in a task, or dishonors his boss, he must apologize. And in their world, an apology is not paid with words, but with a piece of oneself. The ritual is one of cold, methodical self-mutilation. The offending member will lay his left hand on a clean cloth. He will then take a short sword, a tanto, or a sharp knife, and, with his own hand, amputate the top joint of his pinky finger. The severed digit is then carefully wrapped in the cloth and presented to the oyabun as a profound gesture of his remorse. For subsequent offenses, the next joint of the same finger is taken, and then he moves on to the ring finger. A man with a missing finger joint is instantly recognizable in Japanese society as a current or former member of the Yakuza, a permanent physical mark of his shame and a chilling symbol of the organization's brutal code. The Yakuza have long been feared for their criminal enterprises, from illegal gambling and loan sharking to extortion and sex trafficking. But their role in Japanese society has always been complex. They adhere to a code they call the Ninkyo, which they interpret as a chivalrous duty to protect the weak and the common people. This has led to bizarre situations where the Yakuza have engaged in public charity. After the devastating Kobe earthquake in 1995, and again after the 2011 tsunami, Yakuza syndicates were among the very first to organize and deliver massive amounts of disaster relief to the affected areas, often faster and more efficiently than the government itself. This has created a strange, paradoxical image of the Yakuza as both violent criminals and honorable outlaws. In recent decades, strict new anti-gang laws in Japan have cracked down hard on the Yakuza, crippling their finances and leading to a decline in their membership. But the society endures, a relic of a feudal past that refuses to die. They are one of the most fascinating and contradictory secret societies in the world. Their forbidden rituals, the sacred sharing of sake, the painful application of their secret skin, and the brutal self-amputation of yubitsume, are not just bizarre traditions. They are the very glue that holds the organization together, a system of control designed to create an unbreakable bond of loyalty, family, and fear. They are a brotherhood where you sell your soul for power not with a signature, but with your own skin and your own flesh. Deep in the forests of southern Italy, in a makeshift hut, a new recruit kneels before a man holding an axe. He is blindfolded, surrounded by other men whose faces are grim in the flickering torchlight. He is about to swear a sacred, blood-curdling oath of secrecy, an oath that will make him a brother to thousands across the country and a traitor to his king. He is becoming a member of the Carbonari. This was not a club for the idle rich or a gang of criminals. This was a feared secret society of revolutionaries, a brotherhood that sold their souls, not for personal gain, but for the dangerous and intoxicating idea of a free and unified Italy. The Carbonari, or charcoal burners, emerged from the chaos of the Napoleonic Wars in the early 1800s. After Napoleon's defeat, the old oppressive monarchies were restored to power across Italy. The Austrian Empire controlled the north, and a corrupt Bourbon king ruled the south. The new, dangerous ideas of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, and nationalism, were brutally suppressed. Open political dissent was impossible. The only way to organize, the only way to dream of a different future, was in secret. The Carbonari became the most widespread and feared of these revolutionary secret societies. Their power came from their central, elaborate metaphor, which was both a source of romantic inspiration and a brilliant security measure. They were the charcoal burners, men who worked in the dark forest of political oppression. Their sacred mission was to take the dirty wood of the common people, and through the fire of revolution, transform it into pure, valuable charcoal, an enlightened and free society. Their meeting places were called baracche, or huts. The world outside was the forest. The secret inner chamber of the meeting was the vendita, the place for selling charcoal. Their members did not call each other comrades. They called each other buoni cugini, or good cousins, creating a powerful pseudo-family bond. But to join this family, a recruit had to pass through their most important forbidden ritual, a terrifying multi-stage initiation designed to test their courage and ensure their absolute loyalty. A new member or apprentice would be led blindfolded through the forest to the secret hut. Inside, he would be subjected to a series of symbolic trials and questions. He would be told the story of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, who was presented not as a divine figure, but as the ultimate victim of tyranny. He would be made to walk over a fire, symbolizing his purification. Finally, he would be brought before the Grand Master of the Lodge. An oath of absolute secrecy would be administered at knife point. The initiate would swear to keep the Carbonari's secrets, on pain of death. He was often told that if he betrayed the Brotherhood, his punishment would be to be cut to pieces, then burned, and his ashes scattered to the wind, ensuring his name would be erased from the earth forever. This secrecy was their greatest weapon. The society was organized into small, independent cells. A low-level apprentice would only know the identity of a few of his fellow cousins. He knew nothing of the society's larger structure or its true leaders. This cellular design, much like that of the Illuminati, was meant to protect the network. If one member was captured and tortured by the secret police, he could only give up his own small cell, leaving the rest of the vast organization intact. And the organization was vast. Unlike the exclusive Hellfire Club or the intellectual Illuminati, the Carbonari were a mass movement. At their peak, they had hundreds of thousands of members across Italy, France, Spain, and Portugal. They were shopkeepers, lawyers, soldiers, and even nobles. They were a genuine and deeply feared revolutionary threat. They successfully infiltrated the armies of several Italian kingdoms, and throughout the 1820s and 1830s, they orchestrated a series of armed rebellions and insurrections against the ruling monarchies, particularly in Naples and the northern kingdom of Piedmont. The absolute monarchies of Europe, especially the powerful Austrian Empire, were terrified of them. The Austrians' feared chancellor, Clemens von Metternich, saw the Carbonari as the single greatest threat to stability on the continent. His secret police were obsessed with infiltrating and destroying the network, and they knew the Carbonari's greatest strength, their secrecy, was also their greatest weakness. The society was locked in a constant paranoid battle against spies, informants, and the ever-present threat of betrayal from within. Ultimately, most of the Carbonari's own revolutions failed. They were often poorly organized and brutally suppressed. But their legacy is immense. They were the true godfathers of the Italian unification movement known as the Risorgimento. Though their own efforts were unsuccessful, they kept the dream of a free and united Italy alive through the darkest years of monarchist reaction. Many of their former members, men like the great revolutionary Giuseppe Mazzini, would go on to found the next generation of more successful nationalist movements. The Carbonari were a secret society that sold their souls, not for personal gain or mystical power, but for a political ideal. Their forbidden rituals were a powerful tool for forging an unbreakable bond of loyalty among men who were risking everything for the dream of a nation. They are a testament to the power of a secret brotherhood to keep the flame of revolution burning, proving that an idea, when nurtured in secret, can eventually grow strong enough to topple empires. In the dead of night, on a lonely hilltop in the American South, a massive wooden cross is set ablaze, its flames tearing at the darkness, casting dancing, monstrous shadows against the trees. Surrounding it are figures dressed in stark white robes, their faces hidden behind pointed hoods that render them anonymous, almost spectral. This is the most infamous ritual of the Ku Klux Klan, America's oldest and most feared domestic terrorist organization. It is a symbol meant to evoke the power of God, but its true message, delivered for over a century, has been one of pure, unadulterated racial terror. The Klan's history is a story of a monster that refuses to die, a chameleon of hate that has adapted and re-emerged in three distinct and terrifying eras. The first Klan was born from the ashes of the American Civil War. In 1865, in Pulaski, Tennessee, 6 former Confederate officers created a secret social club to relieve their post-war boredom. They devised a series of absurd rituals and titles, naming their leader the Grand Cyclops and their members ghouls. They would ride through the night on horseback, covered in white sheets, pretending to be the ghosts of dead Confederate soldiers. At first, it was almost a prank. But in the chaotic and politically charged landscape of the Reconstruction-era South, this ghostly prank quickly evolved into a powerful tool of intimidation. The Klan transformed into the de facto terrorist wing of the Democratic Party, a secret army whose goal was to violently resist the federal government's policies and re-establish white supremacy. Their forbidden rituals became nighttime raids, lynchings, beatings, and arsons. They targeted newly freed African Americans who dared to vote, own land, or go to school, as well as the white Republicans who tried to help them. The ghost-like costumes were a brilliant piece of psychological warfare, designed to play on superstitious fears and, most importantly, to hide the identities of the town's respectable citizens, the doctors, lawyers, and businessmen who were committing these acts of terror. The first Klan was effectively crushed by federal intervention in the 1870s, but the idea, the ghost, would lie dormant, waiting to be reborn. That rebirth came in 1915, sparked by the release of one of the most successful and virulently racist films of all time, D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. The film glorified the first Klan as heroic saviors, protecting white womanhood from the supposed savagery of freed slaves. The movie was a national sensation, and it inspired a man named William Joseph Simmons to climb to the top of Stone Mountain in Georgia and, in the light of a burning cross, declare the rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan. This second Klan was far different from the first. It was not a shadowy, regional group of guerrillas. It was a massive, mainstream, and highly organized nationwide corporation of hate. At its peak in the mid-1920s, the KKK had an estimated 4 to 5 million members. This was not a fringe movement. This was the heart of respectable white Protestant America. Its members included governors, senators, police chiefs, and judges. Their ideology expanded. They still targeted Black Americans, but now their list of enemies included Catholics, Jews, and new immigrants, all of whom they saw as a threat to their vision of a pure, white, Protestant America. Their forbidden rituals became more elaborate. They had a holy book, the Koran, which laid out their secret oaths and doctrines. They developed a complex hierarchy of clans, convocations, and conciliums. And the cross burning, a ritual introduced by Simmons, became their central, terrifying symbol. They sold their souls for power by becoming a major political force, capable of swinging elections and controlling the politics of entire states. But this massive empire of hate was built on a foundation of hypocrisy and greed. Its leaders were making a fortune from membership dues and the sale of official KKK robes. The downfall of the Second Klan was as spectacular as its rise. In 1925, the Grand Dragon of the Indiana Klan, a man named D.C. Stevenson, who was one of the most powerful politicians in the country, abducted, brutally assaulted, and caused the death of a young woman named Madge Oberholzer. When the state refused to grant him clemency, Stevenson, in an act of revenge, opened his files to the press, exposing the rampant corruption, bribery, and criminality of the politicians and officials who were on the Klan's payroll. The scandal shattered the Klan's image of being a moral, Christian organization, and its membership collapsed almost overnight. The monster, however, was still not dead. The name and iconography of the Ku Klux Klan were revived in the 1950s and 60s. This third Klan was a collection of smaller, independent, and often warring splinter groups, all united by their violent opposition to the civil rights movement. They were the ones who bombed black churches, murdered civil rights workers, and used terror and intimidation to fight a losing, bloody battle against racial equality. Today, the Ku Klux Klan exists as a fractured and marginalized collection of hate groups, a shadow of its former powerful self. But it remains a potent and feared symbol. It is a uniquely American secret society, a chameleon of terror that has adapted its methods and its message across 3 centuries. Its forbidden rituals, the ghostly robes, the secret oaths, and the fiery cross, were never about esoteric knowledge or mystical power. They were tools, designed for the raw, brutal enforcement of racial hierarchy. The Klan is feared not for its secret political machinations, but for its very public and bloody history of lynchings, bombings, and murder. Its legacy is a testament to the enduring power of hate and a chilling reminder of how the guise of a secret fraternal order can be used to unleash unimaginable terror. On Friday the 13th, in October of 1307, a secret order was given by the King of France. At dawn, his men launched a series of coordinated raids, storming every Templar preceptory in the kingdom. They arrested hundreds of knights, from the youngest recruits to their venerable and aged Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. These men were the living legends of Christendom, the elite, battle-hardened warrior monks who had been the shock troops of the Crusades for nearly 2 centuries. But the charges leveled against them were not of treason or corruption. They were accused of heresy, of spitting on the cross, of worshipping a demonic severed head, and of institutionalized sodomy. This was the beginning of the end for the most powerful, wealthy, and feared secret society of the Middle Ages, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, known to the world as the Knights Templar. Their story began with the humblest of origins. Around the year 1119, in the recently conquered city of Jerusalem, a small group of 9 French knights, led by a man named Hugues de Payens, took a sacred vow. They swore to protect the Christian pilgrims who were being robbed and killed on the dangerous roads to the Holy Land. They were so poor, their initial seal famously depicted 2 knights sharing a single horse. They were a monastic order, taking vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. But they were also elite, trained killers. The idea of a warrior monk was radical and new, and it quickly caught fire. The order was officially sanctioned by the Pope himself, and with his blessing, the Knights Templar grew at an explosive rate. They became a new kind of entity on the world stage, a multinational corporation with its own army, accountable only to the Pope. For 2 centuries, they were the tip of the spear in the Crusades, feared by their Muslim enemies for their fanatical, unshakable bravery in battle. Donations from kings, queens, and wealthy nobles across Europe made them fantastically rich. They used this wealth to create one of the world's first international banking systems, allowing pilgrims to deposit money in London and withdraw it safely in Jerusalem. They became the trusted financiers for all of Christendom. But their immense power, their vast wealth, and their absolute secrecy also made them a target. By the early 1300s, the Crusades in the Holy Land were effectively over. The Templars, a massive standing army with no war to fight, had returned to Europe, where they sat in their powerful commanderies, managing their immense fortune. And the most powerful man in Europe, King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, had a very big problem. He was deeply, catastrophically in debt to the Templar order. Philip was a ruthless and ambitious king who was centralizing power and would not tolerate any institution within his kingdom that did not answer to him. He decided to solve his financial and political problems with one brutal stroke. He would not just default on his loans, he would destroy his creditors and seize their assets. To do this, he unleashed a weapon more powerful than any army, a vicious and masterfully orchestrated propaganda campaign. The forbidden rituals of the Knights Templar were almost certainly the product of Philip's own twisted imagination, confessions extracted from the knights through brutal, systematic torture by his royal inquisitors. The list of charges was a work of pure diabolical fiction, designed to horrify a deeply religious population. The central accusation was that during their secret initiation ceremony, new recruits were forced to deny Jesus Christ, spit 3 times on the crucifix, and then trample it underfoot. They were accused of worshiping a mysterious demonic idol in the form of a severed head or a monstrous goat-like figure named Baphomet. The ritual kiss of peace that was common in many knightly orders was twisted into an accusation that initiates were forced to give an obscene kiss of shame on the buttocks or navel of their superiors. The entire order, Philip claimed, was a secret cult of devil-worshipping heretics. On that fateful Friday the 13th, the trap was sprung. The Templars were caught completely by surprise. In the dungeons of the French monarchy, they were subjected to horrific torture. Their feet were roasted over fires, they were stretched on the rack, and subjected to unimaginable pain until they confessed to the king's fabricated charges. Even the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, an old man in his 60s, was broken by the torment and initially confessed. The trial was a sham that lasted for 7 years. The Pope, who was initially skeptical, was a weak man who was politically dominated by the French king, and he eventually dissolved the order. The Templars' vast wealth and lands were seized, much of it ending up in King Philip's treasury. The final tragic act came on March 18, 1314. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, who had heroically recanted his forced confession, was led to a scaffold on an island in the River Seine in Paris. Along with another Templar leader, he was to be slowly burned at the stake. as the flames licked at his feet. It is said that Demole shouted a final terrifying curse, a summons to his betrayers. He cried out to the heavens, summoning both King Philip and Pope Clement V, who had enabled the king's treachery, to meet him before the judgment of God within a year. The curse, it seemed, came true. Pope Clement died of a sudden, agonizing illness just 1 month later. King Philip the Fair died in a mysterious hunting accident before the year was out. The story of the Knights Templar is the ultimate cautionary tale of how a powerful and respected institution can be destroyed by the greed and propaganda of a determined ruler. They were almost certainly not a heretical cult, but their secrecy and their wealth made them an irresistible target. Their forbidden rituals were likely nothing more than lies, tortured out of innocent men to justify their annihilation. Their dramatic and unjust end is what transformed them from a historical military order into the most legendary and mythologized secret society of all time, inspiring centuries of conspiracy theories, treasure hunts, and the enduring belief that the Templars did not truly die, but simply went deeper underground, where they wait to this day. From the occult obsessions of the Thule Society to the ritual murders of the Thuggee cult, from the revolutionary plots of the Carbonari to the sacred oaths of the Knights Templar, we have journeyed through the hidden corridors of history's most feared secret societies. We have seen how they use secrecy, ritual, and fear to accumulate immense power. They are a testament to the human desire to belong to something secret, something powerful, something that operates by a different set of rules. But which one of these secret societies did you find the most terrifying? And what do you believe is the ultimate allure of these forbidden orders? Is it the promise of power, wealth, or secret knowledge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this journey into the world of shadows compelling, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more explorations into the darkest chapters of history.